no reason to think that hasn't been achieved. I'm sure it has. We've seen a gradual decline in cable news. Again, I'm covering both radio and TV here as we look at the new media. But it's significant. It's a significant decline in cable viewing. But I think my projection was that the real tipping point would be in 2015. I wrote that for the book that came out in 2016. I basically was saying right now is the tipping point. And I think I have a slide here that explains why. We'll see. If not, I'll do it by memory. But so there's been some decline, but the big decline was about to hit. We do see here is also interesting the amount of access to these websites, these news websites by desktop and mobile. Blue is desktop, black is mobile. Not just in TV, but also in newspapers. Also, we're seeing in almost every case the greatest access to the news sites is by mobile now, not by desktop computers. This is what is about to collapse in American TV. American local TV stations have been getting most of their money from what's called retransmission fees from cable. So when a cable system comes into your city, they have to get permission from the city itself to dig up streets and all this sort of stuff to put in their cable. And in almost 100%, if not 100% of the cases in America, the local city says, that's fine, you pay us some money, whatever, but you also have to run our local stations. You must run our local stations. And so once they say that, that means the local stations get retransmission fees. Now this projection is that they would continue to get retransmission fees. But that's where I think they're wrong. Because cable, their viewership is dropping, and the data that I think I have in this PowerPoint is going to show it's going to drop even further and faster. If the viewership in cable drops, they can't continue to pay the same retransmission fees. Interestingly, in 2015, I think it was, local TV stations in America were selling at the highest price ever, because the buyers didn't understand what was going to happen. So just like the newspapers in 2005 didn't understand they were about to reach their tipping point, the buyers at TV stations didn't realize they're about to reach their tipping point. And they were depending on these fees to continue up and up and up. This is the only reason why local TV stations are making money right now in America, are the retransmission fees from cable. And so, like I said, the same has hit the newspapers in about 2005. TV in America, I believe, was like 10 years behind. In 2015, I believe, could be seen as their official tipping point. Because of those retransmission fees, especially. This is one of the surveys that I was basing my projections or my predictions on. Again, this was in June 2015. And they had already seen in the last 6 months a drop of 10% in cable subscriptions. So it was not gradual at that point. Already 6 months before that, they'd seen a 10% drop. And as of this survey, they had another 4% saying they were extremely likely to cut off their cable. Another 6% saying they were very likely. Another 11% basically saying they were moderately likely. And another 20% or 19%, more or less, rounding, saying they were slightly likely. But one thing is with a tipping point is once it starts, it's like an avalanche. Once an avalanche starts at the top of a mountain, what happens? It picks up more snow, and people at the bottom are dead. It may start with something really small at the top, but an avalanche picks up more and more power as it goes down. And that's what happens at a tipping point. You see it as being very, very gradual, but suddenly it's that avalanche coming down the mountain. So to me, this was, even though 60% said they were not very likely to cancel in the next 6 months. Maybe they won't in the next 6 months. But we're seeing the start of an avalanche, is what I predicted. That this was going to have tremendous effect. And they also said, here's a, see, is this the next? Okay, this is something else. Let me come back to that. Let's go to this one. So again, this is a drop in cable subscriptions, and this was the last one of the third quarter of 2013. So you're seeing quite a bit of drop even up to before 2013. So that was already, maybe I'm wrong in calling 2015 the tipping point, but I think 2015 is when it would really gain momentum, and that's when it would soon thereafter start affecting local TV stations. As of this point, the local TV stations' retransmission fees were still going up, so it wasn't affecting them. Even though cable TV was getting hurt, it wasn't, for some reason, they were still paying higher fees to the local TV station. So there's kind of a two-step process in this. The cable TV stations have to lose their audience, but the retransmission fees are based on the previous average, and so they will have to go through another cycle before their average viewership is shown to be dropping dramatically, and then they'll have to drop their retransmission fees. So it's kind of a two-step process. They didn't, I guess I failed to make a slide out of another one from that previous survey. This survey here that I was talking about also already showed, well, I'm not sure if this one did, but I just saw in just recent statistics within the last 2 months that more people now are watching paid online services like Hulu and Netflix than are watching cable now. So once they feel like they're satisfied with Hulu and Netflix, that's obviously at the point when they decide, why are we paying these higher cable fees when Netflix and Hulu are cheaper? And once they are sure they have a good enough bandwidth, making some practical decisions, they will decide goodbye cable. And I think that's going to pick up. And as I said, since I predicted it was going to happen, the use of Netflix and Hulu and these other services, Amazon, has continued to go up until it's now surpassed cable. And the number of people in America, anyway, using these other services is bigger. Now, some are still using all of them. And so they're still in this decision-making process. Is Hulu and is Netflix adequate for us? Some of them may be holding on because of sports, for example. Neither Hulu and Netflix covers American football. Stuff like that. You can buy it directly on the internet, but it costs a couple $100 to buy the whole season of professional football, as an example. And so that may delay some of the transition. It is not that they don't perhaps even mostly watch Hulu and Netflix, but they can't watch something very specific that they want, like certain sports. So we may see that delaying some of it, but I think we're going to see this. I think we're past the tipping point. This one is shows the share of time spent per day with major media by U.S. adults. In 2010, I think it was. I'm going to drift over here a little bit closer. I think that I had a chart that was just from 2010, maybe 2009. It might be the first one. It probably was, because I think it's the first time they reported it. This company, eMarketer, had done a study as to what percentage of time people were using in different media. And so in 2009, that was probably the basis of the first one I saw. I showed my students the chart that only had that dark blue line on the left of this series. And so at that time, about 45% of the people's media time was being spent on TV. about 25% online, about maybe 18% on radio. Print had already declined to under 10% in 2009 already. The mobile, however, was almost the same, was getting really close to print. At least, I guess at that point, maybe half of print in 2009. But they also then showed in the same chart, let me make sure I'm reading this one right. They also showed in the same chart how much money they were getting, what percentage of the money they were getting for advertising. In this first chart I saw, and in that first chart it showed that print was getting like 30% of all the advertising money. So people were only reading their print products 10% of their media time or less, but it was still getting 30% of the advertising. Whereas mobile was catching up to print, and it had no advertising in 2009. Basically, it had a microscopic amount of advertising in 2009. Because the only advertising you did on mobile in 2009 was SMS. And people pretty much hated SMS advertising. Not very powerful, not very interesting. It's interruptive. SMS is not good advertising. We still get some. I still get some of my mobile, but I don't think it's good advertising. Certainly not compared to an ad on mobile Facebook, for example, or mobile YouTube. Now you can start using video and stuff, and it's much more effective advertising than an SMS signal. There are some exceptions. There are some things that are happening, like we went up to McDonald's the other day, walked up there for exercise and had dinner and walked back again. And my wife noticed that she was suddenly hit with a whole series of SMS messages. And that's a service. You can set up a service now that basically they can detect when your mobile gets close to them, and it will send you a message automatically. So it's geolocated messaging. And if they use it right, like offering discounts, here you are at McDonald's, we'll give you a 20% discount if you come over to Burger King and show us this message, something like that. So you can kind of, with the geo-based advertising on mobile, it can be pretty effective. They've shown it has been. So there are some things like that are still SMS driven, but SMS is not nearly as powerful as multimedia, as seen, through the years with TV versus other media. So anyway, my prediction in 2010, I think, is when I saw that first time usage chart and compared it to the amount of advertising. I told my students, look out for this. I don't know what's going to, like I said, at that point, all the only advertising in mobile was SMS. I said, I don't know what's going to be created for mobile advertising. But I can guarantee you that in the next couple of years, you're going to see a revolution here. Because in a free market, when you see an opportunity, it's like a vacuum. And that vacuum will draw in investment. It will draw in innovation. It will react to that vacuum. And so what the mobile represented in 2009 was people were spending almost as much time, or at least half as much time on their mobile device as they were, I think maybe it's 2010 that I was looking at, because I was pretty sure it was closer than what we're seeing in 2009. So maybe the chart I saw was 2010. So in 2010, you see the green line compared to the green line of newspapers, much closer to being the same. And yet, no advertising in mobile, hardly. Minuscule amount of advertising. And I said, watch that. That's going to change around. And then look at the chart here. What has happened with mobile usage. And now I don't have the statistics here, but mobile advertising is skyrocketed because of this vacuum nature of a free market. Opportunity, innovation, investment, bam, it explodes. And so since that time, the newspapers have, and the mobile had, like that, because of the time usage. The advertising follows the audience. It's all economics. Advertising follows the audience. It doesn't happen in the same day. It may take even a couple of years. The same as the retransmission fees are going to take longer to come down than the audience is going down. It takes a little bit of response time. But ultimately, economically, the advertising will follow the audience. And that's what has definitely happened with mobile. Mobile advertising has skyrocketed, and print advertising has collapsed further since that 2010 study where it showed such a, again, newspaper readership was under 10, newspaper advertising over 30%, mobile viewing was close to, was 6 or 7%, something, maybe 6 or 7% in 2010, and no advertising. Well, that was bound to change. There's some stuff you can read if you want to. Then there's also the aspect of multitasking during their TV time. This is also a little bit harder to understand all the dynamics of this. But for example, you see the difference between the smartphone. This is smartphone comparing smartphone and tablet. But you see that while they're watching TV, in this survey, 49% of the people are also surfing the web on their smartphone, and 66%, that actually adds up to more than 100%. But you see there, so the statistics, they probably aren't doing both at the same time. But, some are doing the smart pad at a time. Sometimes they're going to their tablet. But almost, just a very, very high percentage of people in the U.S. are now using two devices at once. And so they have the TV on, so that also is undermining TV, right? Because what, again, I may have said this before, what are you really selling when you sell advertising? You're selling people's attention. That's what you're selling. That's not attention. Okay, that's not attention. And so now, with that comes this whole question then of how much TV advertising is worth if people are if they're spending their time, if they're ignoring the advertising, and as soon as the ad comes on, they go to their mobile device, basically, and start chatting with their friends. You see that online, a lot of them are shopping. Again, these add up to more than 100%, but some are checking the sports scores on their mobile device while the TV's on. Some are looking up the actors and plots and athletes involved in whatever they're watching. Some are emailing, texting. Some are reading discussion about the TV program on social sites or making, some are buying products, services being advertised. That's kind of a positive aspect of it. Some are, sending comments, voting, whatever. Some are watching certain TV programs because of something read on social media, so that may draw them back to TV. But anyway, you're seeing a lot of people multitasking during their TV time, which is undermining their attention. And so if you're paying for people's attention when you buy advertising, this means you're not getting it anymore. You're not getting their attention, at least not the way you used to. This is another survey, same sort of results. I browse the internet on topics not related to what I'm watching on TV. 50% of people said that. I email, chat, visit social networking sites and topics not related to what I'm watching on TV. 44% said that. So a lot of what they're doing during this multitasking is not related to what they're watching. And so again, if suddenly an ad comes on, that's the ideal time to start texting a friend or paying attention to your mobile device. You don't want to watch the ad anyway, and so you switch from watching the TV show that's, you're being carried along by the drama, by the narrative. Now you're going to your here comes the ad, bam, you go to your multitasking, going to the internet. Here are reasons why people are watching their entertainment on the internet rather than traditional TV. They want to do their own schedule. I exclusively, well, I haven't watched TV for ages. I guess when I go on vacation, I may watch it with my kids and grandkids. But that's the only time I watch TV anymore. It's all on the internet. And a lot of it has to do with my schedule. I'm kind of a workaholic, and then after work, I go out and walk the track and so forth. So I may not watch any TV until, any entertainment TV till 11:30 at night before I get on. So I want to watch what I want to watch. So it's more convenient. I can skip commercials. Obviously, the Netflix doesn't include commercials. Prefer to watch multiple episodes all at once. That's called, sometimes people call that binge watching. That's me for sure. That's me. So I start a series on TV, and I want to see how many episodes they have before I even start. Because to me, it's like watching, I like to binge watch because it's like a long movie. And so I watch one episode after another episode after another episode till I'm done with all the episodes that are available, and then I go to another show, my second choice show. So it's like, to me, just a really long movie that I'm watching over a period of time. So I'm a binge watcher for sure. I really enjoy watching lots of episodes, one after the other, of whatever show I decided is my favorite at the moment that I haven't already watched. Less expensive than cable. Again, fewer commercials. Some people, watch another show at the same time, so you can have a screen-in-screen setup where you can watch more than one. That's particularly, I think, probably husband and wives. The husband wants to watch sports. The wife wants to watch a movie. So they put the sports up in the corner so the husband can keep track of the sports while watching and trying to be nice to his wife to watch the movie, whatever. They really want to be watching the sports totally, but nonetheless, they're multitasking between the movie and sports, something like that. Anyway, you get the idea. There are lots of reasons why people are moving to the internet, and that's not going to stop either. More and more people like myself are going to feel that advantage. They're going to and prefer to watch their stuff on the internet for lots of reasons. That even if they don't care about the cost, there are advantages to going to the online viewing that I think will draw more and more of the viewers over there. Okay, well, I thought while we're kind of waiting, making sure the team was ready to go, we'll let them come up and present Poe's view on audiovisual. But I wanted to kind of give you an advance on what's happening, so you can kind of look at the past and the future at the same time, where it began, what it was like, and now in the future, what it's becoming. Very different experience now than when it started back in the 1920s with early radio, then into the golden age of radio in the 1930s, 1940s, early 1950s, into the TV age, 1950s, 1960s, up until recently, when TV still dominated. But now, here comes the internet, and I'm going to knock them out. Okay, was it Team 10? If you guys want to come up and set up, you guys can take over.
Today we will introduce the humanity in the age of audiovisual media. It's a story. A corpus was laid out. A man is afraid, but he had to see the corpus. Then he shut out. This is how Plato think about the age of audiovisual medium. We may see or hear something we don't want. And he thinks that drama pretends to show us life in all its richness, and it succeeds so well that it can and does trick almost everyone. When viewers see an actor pretending to be in pain, they are likely to feel as if they are witnessing a real pain. we find ourselves delighting in actions that we would ordinarily condemn. If we view enough, then we will begin to act like the actors. Our moral will decline. And one still convincing point is, according to Plato, drama is similar to audiovisual media. The feature is extraordinarily compelling, and we can reject reading and listening, but we have to see or hear people, even they are doing or saying something odd. Plato feels that if people were afforded the opportunity to see whatever they want, they will lose control. And before the reasons are demonstrated, let's know how the features of audio media and how they work. First is what we watch and why we listen. There's two things need to be established to prove the prose theory. One is we need to know how to do audiovisual medium before we deal it, and at least very often or widely. Then we can confidently conclude that people could have employed audiovisual medium but didn't because demand was too low. The second, we need to show that some significant historical disjuncture made existing media, talking, writing, and printing is insufficient for the purpose for some organized groups or groups that these groups developed a pre-existing technical capacity. In this case, audiovisual know-how into a real medium. Then it's audiovisual medium before audiovisual medium. First, humans really like to watch and listen. They have a natural hunger to see and hear certain things. For most of human history, they see and hear what was naturally all around them, including each other. In this long area, there were no artificial visual or sonic medium. Then things change. Then the things began to change after 40,000 years ago, when our ancestors started to draw, paint, and sculpture things. Judging by what they paint and sculpture, they were very interested in what we are still very interested in. Then, in addition to visual arts, our ancestors also used the performer art to represent this common set of racy things. But it stands to reason that prehistorical people performed rituals in which dramatic events were reenacted. The dramatic arts were both highly developed and very popular in the Hellenic world. And during this era, the high-quality art wasn't easy to come because of the economic and logistical. The first is economic. The elite can afford them, but some paupers couldn't afford them. Then the logistical. Even in this case, where good art were affordable, there were really limits on the size of audience and could view it. And these two considerations meant that many people in this area were not going to see or hear the things they want to see or hear. Next, for common people, Through this area, the commerce calendar was full of festivals, fairs, and games. These folk traditions went some way towards satisfying people's appetites for oral and visual stimulation and thereby reduce social pressure. And there's endemic characteristic of this area. It is too much demand for audiovisual stimulation and not enough supply. And this is imbalance. To right this imbalance, some means had to be found to lower the cost of producing representations of these things. The purveyors of print were the first to attempt a solution. Then, in 1857, this person invented phonautograph, and in 1896, technology radio began to sell. And in 1920s, the first commercial radio station organized, and in 1930s, first commercial television broadcast made, and this technologies was widely adopted in 1950s. And according to an estimate in the CIA World Factbook, there were over 2.5 billion radios and 1.4 billion televisions in the world in 1997, the last date for which data are available. And next is putting the audiovisual medium into existence. That is, why did audiovisual media take off with such rapidity in 20th century? That newly involved organized interests have found existing media insufficient for their purpose, began to firstly seek out new media, and in this case, the audiovisual variety. And there's three organizations' interests were undergoing significant change. First is consider industrial capitalism. The essence of mercantile capitalism was changed. The movement of goods from a place where they could buy for a low price to another place where they could be sold for a higher price, and mercantile capitalism requires a lot of paperwork, and therefore those who practice it had to have some facility with reading and writing. The essence of industrial capitalism was production, the organized manufacture of goods to be sold in a market, make widgets and sell them to people who need widgets. Then engineering and marketing worked together in the 19th and 20th century to stimulate demand for audiovisual media. And the second change consider the welfare state. The early modern European state was dedicated to two activities: making wars and collecting taxes so it could make war. And in medieval and early modern Europe, most princes ruled by some sort of divine right. They did God's will first and people's will second. The Europe states took on a new mission in the late 19th century. That mission was public welfare. And the American and the French Revolution marked the beginning. After these events, only governments of the people, by the people, for the people would be deemed truly legitimate. Both liberal and conservative regimes answered the popular call for the creation of a society safety net. People saw the audiovisual media and they wanted them. Politicians saw that there was political hay to be made by helping constituents get them. Moreover, there were compelling economic reasons for some sort of central coordination of these emerging networks. So it happens that European countries generally opted for state-run telephone networks, as well as taxpayer-subsidized nation radio and television broadcasting service, the BBC being the most familiar example. The third is consider cultural liberalism. The pastors of early modern Europe generally wanted their flocks to be able to read and write. They made effort to see that they learned generally sub and were ported in their pro-literacy activities by princes. Literacy rates rose, but it certainly was not the case that princes and pastors wanted their subjects to write and read anything. Theaters' dress was licensed. Popular entertainment monitored and even was regulated by some sumptuary law. Then it changed to cultural liberalism, that the government's power to censor representations could be abridged. Representations have no obvious corrupting effects. It became very difficult to halt the expansion of the freedom of expression. And cultural liberalism allowed every information share around people, that more and more information is available, so it's easy to draw people's attention. We have no more control over what we listen to and look at than we do over whether our hearts pump or our lungs breathe. And these three changes of organization's interests brought audiovisual media into existence. And the last is what all audiovisual media did. Our push theory of media effects predicts that audiovisual media should have altered the social practices and the values of print culture. Next, she will talk about the feature of audiovisual media.
Okay, let me talk you something about the audiovisual media some section. And the first one is accessibility. Accessibility. The audiovisual medium accessibility. We can see on the sun side the tools and skills necessary to produce and send audiovisual signals are expensive. The equipment itself does not cheap, and even you have a full equipped studio, you wouldn't know how to use any of it without extensive training. Yet you will never able to acquire and learn to do all of these things. So on the same side, we can see it is expensive and not everyone could afford, and it is difficult to use without extensive training, and you need degree in journalism and dramatic arts, and it cannot be individual. And on the receive side, it is cheap. You can see it is cheap, and this equipment are cheap and cheaper, at the 20th century. We just need a box, either a radio or a TV. Do not need to learn skills. There is a gap here, but I think it is not the reality. Actually, it is not that expensive now to be a singer. Thanks to internet and the technology, we media is a medium like YouTuber came up. So I don't think it's. And let's back to the seaside. On the seaside, we night work is concentrate. As for skills, we can see you need none. A comprehension test shows that almost every people gets radio, TV, and movie immediately. Despotic governments could make it illegal to own a radio, but they won't, because it would deny them the opportunity to use it for propagandatic purposes. Any citizen was free to transmit the audiovisual signals within the limit of the state's regulatory structure. And on the receive side, we can see network is diffused. A large percentage of those in the network will have the ability to receive signals, and it is equalization. Any citizen could listen and watch the audiovisual medium. And the next one is privacy. On the same side, it is difficult to hide the fact that you are broadcasting signal from a radio or television section. On the receive side, it is possible for someone to tell whether you're listening to the radio or watching TV in the privacy of your own home. Diction equipment. And here is some conclusion. You won't be able to broadcast audiovisual signal without reviewing your whole position, but you will probably be able to privately listen to or watch whatever you like. And the next one is fidelity. The world is experience itself. Listening to and watching record audience medium or record signal. A record voice should sound like a natural voice, and they don't seem to stand for something. They appear to something, like this picture. And the audiovisual medium change all that. Audiovisual medium are very high fidelity, at least in the audio and the visual channels. What goes in comes out the same way. In the Manuscript and the print eras, hundreds of well-born people occasionally watch plays in public amphitheaters. Can't say that. Okay. Here is a problem. Is about the privacy. Written and print signals are often constitutionally protect speech, broadcast audiovisual signals, usually or not. But many audiovisual signals were either intrinsically public or hard to make complexly prevent. So, right to privacy. And volume. And the next one is the volume of the audiovisual medium. The volume of, let's say, the past or the volume of speech writing and printing. And an intuitive way to measure the volume that speech writing and printing can sustain is to find the number of words in the type message and then multiply it by the number of the receptors. With the simple method, we reach the simple conclusion that speech and writing were low volume, while printing was high volume, but the sounds and the image can't be counted. One could react the byte and the bytes typical audiovisual message content, but that finger doesn't information received by the listener or viewer. A high compressed small digital sound file can sound as good as uncompressed very large digital sound file. It all depends on comparison software and the sensitivity of the listener. And the signal of voice there. Audiovisual medium of the conclusion is audiovisual medium of very high volume. Audiovisual medium delivered millions of messages, long and short, continuously flowing through thousands of channels to billions of listeners and viewers. And as new technologies come online, they will have the capacity to deliver even more message through more to people. And we'll call velocity. It's velocity. Audiovisual medium, the long production cycle. Audiovisual medium are low velocity because they take a long time to produce. Feature films can take decades to produce. Albums can take years. Radio shows months. TV shows equally as long. And generally speaking, professional quality audiovisual message can't be fashioned that fast. Here is a video. We can see you can learn more deeply.
The accessibility of audiovisual media often depends upon whether you intend to be the sender or the receiver. To be on the broadcasting end of audiovisual media takes a great deal of resources and can generally only be sought after by those who have access to those resources. As such, the power to send messages is concentrated in the hands of a few, leading to a hierarchical structure. This accounts for why most media outlets are a part of a larger conglomerate. But while it might not be possible for the masses to produce this form of media, it is generally inexpensive to acquire a way to receive it. Radio, television, and other ways of receiving this media are relatively low priced, allowing for easy access to the media all over the world. As nearly all people can afford the capability of receiving AV messages, the experience is equalized, leading the differences between people to lose some of their importance. The those who consume AV messages alone in their homes seem to have a significant amount of privacy. Your friends don't know what you're watching or listening to, allowing you to live your life how you wish. If you want to watch something racy, you can do so without the risk of getting caught. However, for those producing, it's quite a different story. As it's very difficult to hide signals from a radio or television set, very little privacy exists for the producer of content. These signals can be detected with relative ease and pinpoint your near exact location. Thus, sending audiovisual messages is very public, forcing the sender to be open. Receiving these messages is not, allowing the viewer to maintain privacy. One of the many advantages audiovisual media holds over other forms of media is in its fidelity. Both audio and visual stimuli are quite high in fidelity. While speech and writing are symbolic forms of media, audiovisual media is iconic. For example, the word lion in no way resembles a lion. However, when we watch a video of a lion, we immediately recognize it as a lion. The same is true for audio media. When we hear the sound of birds singing, we can immediately identify with it. This, in part, is what serves to make audiovisual stimuli so captivating. Being of such high fidelity means that once the message is received, it requires little or no effort to decode. Simply put, iconic forms of media allow messages to be recognized. Humans naturally seek out pleasure, images and sounds provide pleasure, and since audiovisual forms of media have relatively low cost to produce, audiovisual media quickly became a cheap source of pleasure. And so, with low production costs, the masses were able to consume audiovisual media en masse with relative ease. Another one of audiovisual media's strengths is its ability to heave massive amounts of information at us. Remember the saying, "A picture is worth 1,000 words"? This statement seems to describe audiovisual media in a nutshell. AV media sources deliver hundreds of millions of messages through truly massive networks to billions of Earth's inhabitants daily. And looking towards the future, technology seems certain to further increase this capacity over time. This massive volume of transmission allows for nearly completely unconstrained sending and receiving. And by allowing for unprecedented data transmission, audiovisual media allowed us to indulge ourselves in ways we never thought possible. Audiovisual media has led us to become more hedonistic, pursuing pleasure as a primary good. But while audiovisual media are able to pervade our minds easily, they often don't come about in a timely fashion. Take some time to consider a question about the time it takes to develop this media. When was the last time you heard your favorite artist was putting out an album? Now, after considering that, how long did it actually take for that album to be completed? Most likely, if it was anything of quality, it took some time. That's because the development of audiovisual media is a slow process. The reason for this is due to the fact that the production values for audiovisual messages are often of high quality. Now, aside from the production aspect, audiovisual media can be moved quite quickly, assuming it has an efficient means of transportation. Electromagnetic waves travel at speeds close to the speed of light in certain conditions and tend to be an efficient means of transport for the messages. However, while the speed of transmission itself might be fast, the time it takes to develop that transmission holds the overall turnaround time down. So when a pundit makes a foolhardy comment, it's unlikely we'll launch a video response right back at him. Rather, we'll call the production company which hosts him and give our response. In effect, this means we're letting the pundit lecture us without getting to lecture back. This model encourages only one side to make a point, making it a monologic network, where discussion and debate barely exist. In practice, this means your TV can talk to you, but you cannot talk back to your TV. Alas, we see this clearly in the entertainment industry. Parent networks like ABC, CBS, and NBC send out their messages to consumers who cannot respond back. The accessibility.
Now I'm going to discuss the range of the audiovisual media through two angles. The first is the coverage of it is wide. The electromagnetic wave, including the radio and TV signal, can travel a long way, and
the equipment, the DXERS, can tune in stations thousands of miles away in good condition, but few people have it. However, the good commercial broadcast transmission has soon replaced it. The broadcast transmission can transmit signal between 10 and 50 miles, and any commercial radio and signal can tune them in. All you need is just buy a satellite dish or get cables. Then you can get feeds from every part of the world. So the equipment is much more convenient, and so that the most of people have this equipment and could receive a copy of whatever is being transmitted. And that means the enormous audience, particularly for single events. So above all, audiovisual media has a long range and great reach. Under right conditions, speech can reach hundreds of people, manuscript writing thousands, and print hundreds of thousands. Audiovisual media, however, can reach millions of people scattered all over the globe as a matter of course. The second angle I will provide to you is that the content of the audiovisual media is diverse. We propose that the extensive network in which information is passed over great distance and through large populations would diversify social practice and the value accompany them. Geographically large and demographically inclusive network promote interaction amongst strangers more readily than those that are small and monochrome. So in this part, I will discuss the differences between the speech and manuscript errors and the audiovisual error. In the speech and manuscript errors, people's knowledge were more or less confined to what they experienced in their own daily life, which were almost always narrow. But print broadened people's horizons to some degrees by bringing them foreign experience to read. But however, diversifying as a diversifying agent, print has drawbacks. It was comparatively difficult to distribute. Not everyone could decode it, and there were many different and mutually unintelligible codes. Not so audiovisual media. They truly democratized experience. Radio and TV could be banned anywhere. Physical transportation was in most cases unnecessary. Anyone could get it, and the cultural barrier was low. So just as what the author has written down in the book, that the audiovisual media allows people to trade experience and therefore broaden their experiential horizons in a way previously unimaginable. Then we will come to the other characteristic of the audiovisual media is the persistence. We notice that the longevity of any manuscript is a function of substrate, script, and language. The persistence of audiovisual media is also determined by only three factors. Chiefly, the medium in which they are recorded. The recording media are necessarily very durable, but audiovisual recording can be easily transferred to more robust media. Since the copies can be reproduced rapidly and cheaply, audiovisual recording are also protected by remarkable redundancy. The second is the means used for playback. You can just take the old, nearly obsolescent format and re-record it in the new, very common one. Record companies, movie studios, and TV networks have been updating formats for some time. The current wave of updating digitization not only help this company preserve their products, but also enable them to sell you the same product twice. And as for the language obsolescence, it's really not an issue as of this moment, because the vast majority of all audiovisual production have been and are recorded in major languages spoken by millions of people. So the audiovisual media, we can safely conclude, are quite persistent. Persistent media give rise to addictive network, that is, those in which data accumulate rapidly. According to the theory, addictive networks are a social practice involved in and around them. In such network, the artifacts of the past build up in the present, making progressively more of the past visible and manipulable. Time horizons recede. History is written and rewritten. There can be no doubt that the audiovisual media historicize social practice. It could help us really see or hear what has happened before. And they transmitted the sights and sounds of the past to the present so that the past could be replayed in a stream that everyone could get. This ability provides extraordinary attractive to the powerless, and everyone else interested in re-experiencing what had happened before. The result was the practice of audiovisual documentation. The idea of the documentation is the accumulation, classification, and dissemination of the information. The object is the paper, or rather the data on paper. But the term quickly migrated to non-fiction, film, and folk music. And the development of the documentation is that around 1930s, the American Work Progress Administration launched a massive project to document. Audiovisual documentation began as an elite phenomenon, but as the price of camera and recording device declined following World War II, audiovisual documentation became a mass phenomenon. The most significant historical impact of audiovisual documentation, however, was mass surveillance. Until the advent of audiovisual media, they had to do it in personal or by proxy. That made surveillance expensive and ambiguous. Affordable bars and video cameras made mass surveillance inexpensive and seemingly unambiguous. The prospective value of the audiovisual record changed. The so-called Watergate tapes, that is, tapes of conversations between the president and his officers, recorded. No tabs, no problems. Over time, the art of doctoring audiovisual records became much more sophistication. Today, that art is so advanced that recording photos and films no longer have the same documentary values that they once had. That was the situation. Audiovisual media enable us to capture and perceive more of the present than was ever possible with speech, writing, or printing. The last feature is the searchability. The recorded audiovisual message can be searched but not easy. Audiovisual materials are not very searchable. In most cases, you simply have to go through them in order to get what you want. Media that are not readily searchable generate map network. The theory predict that the map media network will professionalize social practice involved in and around them. The effect caused by the spread of audiovisual media is similar to the spread of print. It's the weaken the professions and strengthen the new ones. Although the live entertainment industry was hardly destroyed by the advent of records, movies, radio, and TV, it was appreciably changed. The theater, music hall, and their live cousins came to occupy the small niche in huge audiovisual centers entertainment market. The special knowledge that was required to put on one of these shows was no longer in high demand, and so these professions shrank and faded. More accurately, they were weaned out and concentrate in audiovisual production units. The studios soon began to develop their own talent. Develop is exactly the right word, for it gets to the heart of the difference between the old live theater world and the new broadcast world. In the theater world, the act was often most important than the performer. But in the broadcast world, performers would be seen by millions many times, as audience grew and faces were committed to memory. Viewers strongly identified with the performers. The star became more important than the act. The studios realized that the star could be made if the right promotional technique were employed. So they set about building the legal, technical, and artistic infrastructures of the modern star system, so that the dream factory was built. Then finally, the conclusion is that we discussed the reason why we cannot reject watching audiovisual media. The reason why we cannot reject watching audiovisual media is that we all have to look. There is something deeply physically compelling about audiovisual media. something more forceful than talking or reading. We live in a world of relatively unconstrained media choice. In our free time, we listen and watch more often, for longer, and more pleasurable than we talk and read. The choice is largely independent of content. We often choose awful TV show than a good book. And we don't feel guilty about our compulsion to look at things that are not deserving of his attention, things that might do us harm, things that teach nothing. Also, then is the question time.
The first question is, in this area, high-quality art wasn't easy to come because of A, economic, B, political environment, C, logistical, D, a standard of culture. A and C. And which of the following statement is not true? In this area, some activities beheld can reduce social pressure. Plato's opinion towards dramas and actors is positive. C. The technology is widely adopted in 1930s. D. The essence of mercantile capitalism is production. E. The prevail of print were the first to attempt a solution to right this imbalance that there's too much demand for audiovisual stimulation and not enough supply. D. B. And that's three answers. The answer is B, C, and D. His opinion is negative, and the technology is widely adopted in 1950s. The essence of mercantile capitalism is trend.
It's an easy question. What form does the age of audiovisual medium fit? It's D, right? It's one too many. And the next question.
So in which era that diversification is everywhere? So it's B. Which is not the function that caused the longevity of manuscript. The answer is D. So our reference is from this book. This book. Thank you.
Before you gals leave today, would you make sure I have a copy? And also I have another question for you when the class is over. I just need your time a second. Okay. We're about out of time. Maybe just a few quick comments. Let me see where. Okay. Anyway, not that we need this, but I just wanted something up there instead of a blank screen. What would you say is of all the characteristics of those different attributes of media would be the most distinctive for audiovisual? Which of all of them do you say would be the one attribute that most distinguishes audiovisual from the previous ages of communication? Anybody? Of all those different attributes, fidelity and volume and velocity, which out of all of those would be the one that you'd say that's the thing that makes it totally different than everything else, in the most important ways, in the most powerful ways? What do you think? Give me some opinions. I have to walk out there and ask you. Okay, Miss, would you please answer this question?
I think A is fidelity. Fidelity.
Fidelity? How many think it's fidelity? How many of you vote that of all the attributes, the most powerful one for audiovisual is fidelity? So let me make another motion. What other one would you say would be stronger than fidelity? I personally would vote for fidelity. I mean, that's the idea that you don't really have to, there's almost no decoding. There's some. I mean, technically there's some decoding. I think the comment was there's no decoding. There's almost no decoding. When you're looking at audiovisual, you're looking at what you perceive to be practically reality. Probably in the truth, you need to become, I guess, part of your media literacy should be to understand that you can manipulate video and audio in ways that can actually distort its reality. And so in that sense, it's not really not perfect fidelity by any means. If it can be distorted and give you a misimpression of reality, then it's not perfect fidelity. So I would object to the idea that it is essentially perfect, or that it is perfect, let me put it that way. But it certainly is closer to it than anything else, than the previous manuscripts and print and voice. Again, you were talking, in the speech age, you basically were trying to interpret that, the stream of words, but you didn't have the visual aspects of it, and so forth. And so the visual, particularly because of video, when the audiovisual era first started with radio, I actually, when I was young, we used to listen to quite a few of the old radio shows still in the 1950s. And I can still remember there was one famous Western show called, they call it Gunsmoke. And one of the main stars supposedly had injured a leg, so he had a peg leg, that is a wooden leg. And you could hear him walking down the sidewalk and so forth. And some people of my generation would say you've missed out on a lot by not having just the audio, going through the radio, go narrative radio, because it forced you to use your imagination. And imagination can be quite amazing. I know there used to be in America a radio ad that would describe, I can't remember exactly what it was, but something like, they were kind of description like a newsman, and here they're taking off with a helicopter, and they're going up into the sky with a 100-pound maraschino cherry, and they're going up, and they're going to drop it down on top of this 5-story ice cream, chocolate ice cream, what do you call it, sundae with such a billowing top of whipped cream on the top, and here comes the marriage. Anyway, they're describing this. It's not reality, obviously, but they're describing something that you can imagine in such a way that, yes, you could fabricate it and with animation and so forth. That you can do amazing things with video now. But at the time when they were running this radio ad, what they were saying is try to put that on radio. On TV. And so they're trying to say why you should advertise in radio rather than TV. Of course, as I said, video has become, especially the animation aspects and not just animation, but the ability to, work with the video in changing subtle things like, the movement of the mouths. You just move. You can change the mouth movement, and keep the rest of the video the same, and so you can have them saying something totally different, and it looks like it was the original video. You have all sorts of abilities now to edit video that you can create almost anything in video now. But the point was simply that you also could tap into the imagination, and the radio could be something really cool and really amazing also by just your ability to describe and getting drawing people into their imagination. I think it was, as I said, this was when I was like 6 years old that I remember listening to these radio shows, radio dramas, and I still remember them. It's still part of my memory very strongly because of the power of imagination, that I recreated those events into my mind, and it became something that I still am very fond of. And so I wouldn't, I said a lot of people in my generation would say that you've missed out on a lot by not having going through the audio portion of the audiovisual age. There was something special about it that you missed out on. Not to say totally. There are recordings of some of the old dramas, radio dramas, that you can get on YouTube and other places. So you could go access them if you wanted to, but you probably won't, because the audio-visual combination of modern cinema and so forth is more powerful, admittedly. But there's something special about just the audio only. And I think there's something special about reading a great novel, right? When you get back to the age of print, I don't know how many of you have actually read a novel that just really impacted your life, or a book of some kind that you always remember. That's really part of you now. Anybody have a favorite book that really changed your life in some way, or at least has become somehow is so memorable that you're going to probably remember it when you're 80 years old, the impact of it? How many of you have read a book like that? Nobody? Seriously, nobody? Well, you're missing out on more than the audio age of audiovisual then, because books can do the same thing. I remember when I first, back in around 1990, I was reading through all the Born Identity books, the novels Born Identity. And at the time I thought, wow, this should be a movie now. They're written so clearly, so dramatically and stuff that, I could envision all of that happening in the original novels. And I couldn't understand why they weren't already movies. They started coming out with movies like, 8 years later or something. I can't remember exactly when the first, maybe it's 10 years later. But that was so obvious when I read that, because I could see it all in my mind, reading the Born Identity books. So those were some of my favorites. But also there are a lot of nonfiction movie. For example, I teach the success strategies courses, for general education now. I started reading success books when I was probably 8 or 9 years old. some of the early success books and how to achieve success were in America's history and in world history as far as that goes, were written by people like Benjamin Franklin, one of the founding fathers of America. He wrote it as an autobiography, but it was really kind of, this is how you become successful sort of approach to his autobiography. And so I read his autobiography when I was quite young. I don't remember exactly how old I was, but that had a big impact on me. And so, like I say, I'm teaching success strategies now, so it must have had a big impact on me. I read a lot of such books over the years, such as The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and now I love listening. I haven't read a lot of his books, but I've watched every YouTube video, audiovisual, that I can find on Clayton Christensen's disruptive innovation theories. And so that's entertainment to me, is to listen to him, because he's turning the business world upside down. So it's impactful to me in many ways, how to succeed in business, but also this whole idea that everybody's having their conceptual framework turned upside down, and whoa, we didn't see that coming sort of effect, aha effect. So anyway, one of the things that jumped out at me is it had that, I believe it was a 1995 statistic of 1.5 billion TVs in the world. They said it was easy access, but that was very much an American perspective. Because if there was only 1.4 billion, that's nothing compared to our mobile devices now. We've got 20 billion mobile devices in the world now that can access broad bandwidth. So 20 billion versus 1.4 billion. What does that mean? I mean, that is, and consider who has those mobile devices. I said all these people in the little villages of Kazakhstan or villages of Africa or wherever that never had TV actually before. In some cases, like in some of the parts of Africa, didn't have TV ever. And parts of the world where, no, they could not afford a TV, where $55 for a TV was too much for some people. But now, over a period of time, things have changed, and not to say a smartphone is cheaper than a $55 TV, but that $55 TV at the time was probably comparable to a cheap smartphone. But now it's more multifunctional. So a person has a reason to have a smartphone far beyond the reason to have a TV. So now it's become almost a necessity worldwide, because you're communicating with other people with smartphones. So it takes the place of a phone, and it has the broad bandwidth. So now you have the entertainment factor, you have the knowledge factor. Now you can access all sorts of education and training on that phone. That smartphone is much more than just a way of communicating with your friends and family, and it's much more than just having entertainment, and it's much more than just having education. It's everything. You've got lots and lots of reasons to have that smartphone that are very practical and important reasons. There's health reasons even. Now you can, if you don't live anywhere close to a doctor, there's web pages all over the internet that you can find out about your medical needs, and they're developing new programs where you can actually get a diagnosis from doctors and what's wrong, what you might be suffering from. That's still coming, and as far as being full blown, there's aspects of it now, but it'll be more powerful in the future. You may remember, again, I'm thinking back to the late 1960s when Star Trek first came out, but they'd point their recorder? They call it something about a quarter. Anyway, they pointed at somebody, it looked like this, and you're suffering from a broken leg and a brain concussion, whatever. That is tricorder. Maybe it's that right? Tricorder, I guess the right word. Anyway, it was, it's coming to that. There are things happening that would be kind of like that. And in fact, even kind of beyond that. They're talking about, 3D printing, for example. They're talking about 3D printing body parts in the future, let alone guns and, toys and, whatever else you want to 3D produce. They're talking about getting so sophisticated they can 3D print a body part. This is an interesting age we live in. Let me put it that way. Let me see if there's anything. The fidelity, like I said, volume. When you figure out certainly the equation they set up, the number of words you can communicate in a certain period of time times the audience. Obviously, the volume is skyrockets compared to other media. Until now with the internet, but the pre-internet era was made it totally different. And again, they brought up the question. They didn't really answer it because I don't think it's not answerable in a sense, and that is that equation doesn't fit with audiovisual, because how do you measure video and audio? The audio, the words, you can still do the words, but at least the visual aspects of audiovisual or audio-video is how do you compare that to text and manuscript and print and so forth? The saying is a picture's worth 1,000 words. A video's worth even more than that. A video is thousands of pictures run together to create reality. And so how do you compare the visual of audiovisual to manuscripts and print? There's not a good way to, so when you start talking about, volume, it kind of throws their equation out the door. It's very difficult to even make any possible comparison between that and the previous media. Velocity, we've talked about that a little bit already, where the investigative reporter for, now he's with CNN, but was with NBC, I think, talking about his 2,000-pound pencil, how the difficulty of, he would travel all the way from Washington, D.C. to San Francisco and do an interview with this illegal immigrant and do a bunch of other video, and then he'd go back and put it all together, and out of his entire trip to San Francisco, his hour-long interview, and his trip back, they'd use 13 seconds in their investigative report or something. It just it's almost absurd just how time-consuming video can be in order to get the quality that you want. Obviously, you can do reality TV and stuff. But, reality TV isn't really reality. So I didn't mean that so much as in the way it's used nowadays. Reality TV is a lot of it is scripted and stupid. And that's why I don't watch reality TV. But because it's not real. And so it's a misnomer to call it reality TV. But if you do have some live video, sports events, for example, or you have a director who's calling in different shots, different video, different camera feeds, and so forth. But it's live, a great drama for people who are into sports and so forth. So some of that doesn't take this much time of production, just because of the very nature. We're out of time. So in the next class we'll have basically the radio section of this from the Lowell textbook, and then when you get back from your vacation, we'll still have TV from the other textbook from that. Okay, if anybody has any questions, I'll be here for a while, and if that team would come up and make sure I have a digital copy of your PowerPoint, and then I have another question too. Thank you.